Bosses, managers of Reddit, what was your worst employee like? Story 1. The worst employee you can have is one that doesn't do anything egregious enough to fire, but manages to make every single workday that much more aggravating. The worst guy had an attention span of a gnat. You had to write down instructions for everything, even tasks had done a million times before, and checking on him every 15 minutes or so. And yet, given these parameters, had complete perfect work. Every year during performance reviews, we'd argue about whether or not to keep him on, and every year we'd keep him on because the devil, at least we knew how to manage him, and he was manageable. Story 2. Lazy, incompetent, couldn't handle any criticism, and she stole my food. She was very overweight, and anything I ate she would stare down and be like, "Oh my God, that looks so good." I was the manager of a very small business, just me and 2 girls under me, so we spent a lot of time together. She would talk about how she couldn't buy groceries or keep her utilities on, but she wanted to have another baby, and she was cheating on her husband. I hated her so much it gave me anxiety. She had my business too, because of her mistakes, and her clients hated her. I eventually told my boss it was her or me. Boss didn't like confrontation, so I said okay, and took a job elsewhere. The girl ended up getting fired, but it was too late. I wasn't going to stick around after that. Oh, and several times she took her antipsychotic meds during the day. I think they were meant to be taken at night, and tfo. She slept through the phone ringing and me yelling her name because I needed help. Ugh, I get mad just thinking about it. And if you read this, Haley, you're a garbage person. Story 3. The company I work for is pretty hard to get into, even if you have an impressive resume or an awesome reference. Unfortunately, we had a new client. In 1/4, his business would keep our lights on for about 10 years. He asked if his cousin or little nephew could have an entry-level position at our company, and we reluctantly said yes. The kid surfed the web all day looking at cars to buy. Whenever we'd ask him if he completed a task, he'd either lie to us and say he did or say he didn't know how to do it and didn't want to bother any of us for help. Then he brought in all of his gaming systems into the conference room, saying that clients could play them while they waited, which would have been nice, but he played games in the conference room all day. So it came to a point where we gave him the least amount of work to do, ordering paper, delivering lunch, etc. 2 years later, the client comes to us and says that he's going to have his nephew handle the work he was giving us for him, helping him start his own consulting firm. Apparently, the kid lied like no other, making his uncle believe that he was helping run our company. 3 months later, he came back to us for our business. Nephew tried hiring a consulting firm to the side to do his work, so he could play Sonic the Hedgehog all day. Story 4. TLDR almost blew up the building. Had to hide from me to avoid a trip to the hospital. Back in grad school, I ended up being the senior grad student, largely because my prof was an incompetent idiot and all the other senior grad students quit. I was basically the lab manager in addition to handling my own research. Eventually, the prof hired a new grad student. If I recall, his name was Matt. Matt was one of those people whose default expression was slack-jawed, gormless imbecility. When you talked to him, gave advice or instruction, he'd just stare at you with this vacant expression and then just turn away, never acknowledging a thing you said. Matt was a rolling disaster from pretty much day one. He constantly destroyed equipment. E.g., he destroyed several $100s of non-magnetic steel tweezers for TM sample work by taking them all out of their custom carrying cases and just tossing them point down in a glass beaker, destroying their tips. When called out on doing this, he just shrugged and wordlessly stared at me. Oh, he also would bring in his shitty evangelical Christian rock music and play on the lab stereo until I and the other students just got rid of the stereo to not have to listen to the and crappy, not just because it was evangelical Christian music. It's not my thing at all, but he'll grant that some of those bands can at least play well. This was just awful. I'm pretty sure the guy was a young earther. The final straw was one morning when I opened the lab up and walked in and nearly ran right into an unsecured gas cylinder sitting in the middle of the lab aisleway. To the uninitiated, gas cylinders must be secured when the heavy metal transport cap has been removed. The gas outlet at the top is fairly delicate, and if the cylinder falls over and that valve hits something, it will probably get torn off. This turns a heavy metal gas cylinder into an uncontrolled rocket capable of punching through 6-inch concrete walls and turning people into red smears. It's serious. You do not remove the heavy metal transport cap until the cylinder is firmly attached to a sturdy wall clamp or other safety device. This gas cylinder was just sitting in the middle of a walkway with a gas regulator on it and a clear plastic tube trailing over to a bench. A perfect setup for a cylinder getting knocked over and causing a disaster. To add insult to this, the thing was literally a foot away from a cylinder tie down I had mounted to one of the lab benches. After my heart started again, I carefully walked up to the cylinder, grabbed it in a bear hug, and slowly walked it over to the clamp and secured it. Once I safe the cylinder, I examined it to try and figure out what was going on. That's when I saw what gas was in it. Hydrogen. The unsecured gas cylinder was full of hydrogen. If it had fallen over and hit the regulator on any of the benches all around it, it would have turned into a rocket that would have started punching holes through walls all through a busy building with over 50 scientists working in it and leaving behind a trail of hundreds of cubic feet of explosive hydrogen gas. Any flame or spark would have then detonated the hydrogen gas like a fuel-air explosive bomb. This thing could easily have killed most of the people in the building. At this point, I'm on the warpath. I'm seeing red. I storm over, the neighboring building where some of the other grad students were at and demanded to know who had done such a mind-bogglingly stupid thing. They were all pretty appalled and told me it wasn't them. But one mentioned that good ol' Matt had been talking about needing hydrogen gas for some nanoparticle reduction experiments. Now, keep in mind that this sort of experiment needs maybe a few cubic feet of hydrogen gas, a tiny fraction of the volume of the full-size bomb cylinder that had been in the lab. He could have just ordered a tiny bench-top-size lecture bottle that is far safer and had more than enough gas. At that point, I wanted blood. I spent the next hour or so scouring the 3 buildings of my department, looking for Matt, ready to beat the living out of him the minute I laid eyes on him, and pretty sure the other grad students warned him to make himself scarce. After I couldn't find him, I went to the prof and basically told him that it was either me or Matt. Matt left a week or so later, and I never saw him again. Matt, if you ever read this, you're a stupid, irresponsible sack of that nearly killed an entire building full of people, and if I ever see you again, they'll punch your slack-jawed, proto-humanoid face out the back of your skull. Story 5, we were hospital aides on an inpatient floor, so we changed incontinent patients, did vitals, helped patients walk to and from the bathroom or chairs, that kind of stuff. Nurses depended on us to do our jobs, so they could do theirs. This girl would avoid doing any work she could. She'd constantly hide in one of the back nursing stations and hunker down, where she couldn't be seen and read. She'd ignore call bells for select patients who were known to be incontinent and messy, just sit and read while the bell went off and wait for one of the others to grab it. She was allotted a 30-minute break and constantly took up to an hour. When she was training a new girl, she encouraged the same work avoidance behavior. Then she got busted for falsifying vitals. She was upset that she couldn't take her break on her schedule. So when she did go, she was gone for an hour and a half. She came back after the second round of vitals for her shift was due. So instead of getting her in gear, she made them up, manually typed bullshit into the computer. Instead of taking vitals on a machine and saving them, they went to a Wi-Fi cloud to the chart. What ended up happening was she put an average blood pressure measurement, think 13085, on a patient whose normal parameters were about 9,060. So the nurse sees this, notice the patient's blood pressure is 40 points higher than it should be. So she give him a dose of BP meds, his BP tanks, the patient nearly dies. It's a shit show. She gets busted because our heart monitor tech suspected what had happened, gathered all the vitals machines, and printed out copies of every set of vitals that had been taken that evening. Even if you don't save it to the cloud under a patient's name, the machine saves it. None of the numbers matched the ones this girl put in the computer, which proved she hadn't done her job. Who knows how long she had been doing that without getting caught. Would get busy and lose track of her all the time. Because of that tech, the nurse wasn't in trouble, and that aide got fired. Good riddance. ETA, she wasn't prosecuted. I strongly believe she should have. My bosses thought it was embarrassing and figured firing her was enough. The day she was fired, we had a pre-scheduled employee meeting. An hour before the evening shift started, she was late to that and was floated to another unit. So flounced off before the bosses could say, wait. So she takes her purse to another unit, gets called back, gets shown the evidence, and she confesses and is fired. Has to walk back to the other unit to get her purse, has to walk to our unit to get her coat and empty her locker, had to wait for security to take her ID. The entire time she is sobbing, she wore a lot of makeup and looked a disaster. It ended up being very public and embarrassing for her. The entire small hospital knew. She still deserved to be charged, but I hoped she learned something. Story 6 had a ranch hand I caught for animal abuse. I get a high school kid to work at my place every so often for those needed graduation community service hours. He needed like a whole day worth of hours for graduation, and it was a week before. His mom dropped him off in the morning. Luckily, I had enough to do that I could keep him busy for 10 hours on a Saturday. Got there at 6 a.m., obviously didn't want to be there. Got him to help me castrate males, meaning he just held them down while I did the stuff you need a skilled hand for. I give him the task of sorting ewes while I go fix a gate on the other side of the barn. Simple enough. Red chalk on the back goes out in the big pasture. Yellow chalk goes in the little pasture with one ram. Blue chalk goes in the pen with another ram. Simple enough, just catch and sort. I had one ewe I called Felicia cause she was a shed run from you, and all you could say is by Felicia. And once you caught her, she'd fight you tooth and claw to get away. IDK why she was this way. She just was. Anyway, I guess he had trouble getting her to move, and so he reared back and punched this sheep across the nose hard enough to knock out a tooth. Which, trust me, takes a lot. I've seen one run face first, full speed into a wooden barn, and not lose any teeth. And he knocked one out in one punch. I was pissed, pulled him inside, called his mom, sent him home, refused to sign off on his hours because I had to spend time to make sure she didn't get hurt worse than we thought. I should note Felicia died a year later, but just of old age, but she did eventually calm down, and that one missing tooth didn't get in her way too much, always late, and always asked when we could take a break. Every day he had some injury, which excused him for working hard like the other guys. He wanted to use a company truck to pick up a girl he was seeing to go to dinner. One day he showed up at the job site at noon and said he had court that morning, never let me know, and had no paperwork to prove it, fired him there on the spot, and have no idea what he's doing now. Story 7 kid was 17 under me. Didn't do what he was told, mouthed off, would hide, eventually got fired, then about 3 months later, groped a random lady in a nearby park. Ran to the store to steal a car, tried to carjack a customer who stabbed him a few times, and he locked himself in the employee restroom to hide from the police. Story 8 you really can't fire someone for being slow. Like, I guess you can, but you can't. I manage a restaurant. There are certain people who are just slow, and no amount of practice is going to change that. They just move at this pace that isn't conducive to working a cook line. You can do all the coaching in the world, and it won't matter. There's this one guy, well, called Jordan. Jordan moves at the speed of mud. His mouth is always slacked open, and he speaks in such a monosyllabic fashion that you'd wonder if it was a put-on. We have Texas toast where I work. The procedure for dropping Texas toast is as follows. Pick up piece of bread, brush garlic butter across piece of bread, drop on flat top for 45 seconds. Flip for an additional 45 seconds. Sir, the end. Simple. I can drop an entire loaf of Texas toast in under 20 seconds, followed by the 2 to 45 second cook times. This is a simple procedure. Jordan stands there with his loose jaw flapping in the wind, meticulously placing garlic butter on every square inch of each piece of bread, resulting in one piece of toast being completely toasted by the time the next piece hits the flat top. I've gone over to him and demonstrated time and again. Jordan, it's a quick process. Brush, drop, brush, drop, brush, drop, brush, drop, hit timer, wait, flip, hit timer again, serve. He nods his head affirmatively, then proceeds to butter every square inch of the bread again. He walks 1 foot per minute to the fridge to grab cheese sticks to drop in the fryer. He spends 5 solid minutes putting chicken on a plate. He's horrible. Half the time, I just tell him to go do dishes. But I can't really fire him because technically he's not doing anything wrong exactly. He's just doing a poor version of the correct thing. Story 9 was a week into training him, and he replied all to a company-wide email chain with a joke that included the word in it. When you're training someone, it feels like you up however they up. The Frenchman was real. Story 10, I wasn't a boss, but they'll share this story. I worked at the Old Country Buffet while in college. I was a cashier, free food, and I don't have to cook it. My pothead roommate wanted a job, so I hooked him up with an interview, and he got hired. I trained him on the register on his first day on the job. The next day, he was a no-cal, no-show. He just flat out quit. When I got home, I asked him why he didn't come in. He said working there was too hard. This job was impossibly easy. Hi. Welcome to OCB. How many in your party? Punch that number in a register and read total. Collect money. Wave goodbye, man. I miss the food. Story 11 hired a kid. Let's call him John. Fresh out of school to help us. He would download onto his phone and then go to the restroom to every hour or so. Whenever I'd go to the restroom, he was in the stall, and I could hear the playing loudly from his earphones. Then he would work until 2 in the morning to finish his work, and come into work looking like he'd always get his work done. But he was a disaster. I saw him typing at his desk, looking exhausted, and noticed that his hands were waterlogged and wrinkled looking. Another time, we were all in the conference room, and someone say, "Hey, John, are you okay?" I couldn't prove it, but I'm pretty sure that he was jacking himself off under the conference room table. Thankfully, he moved on to another firm after about a year. Before leaving, he wiped his hard disk completely, so that the computer wouldn't even boot. Unfortunately, he couldn't have bothered to clean up the disgusting stains on the carpet, walls, and under his desk. I bought one of those blacklight things that show bodily fluids. Everywhere in the office was clean except under his desk, on his walls, and all over his computer, and my secretary's computer, chair, and filing cabinet. TLDR, employee jerked off all day and worked all night, while occasionally ejaculating onto my computer. Story 12 guy who was constantly on his phone, had a don't stink attitude, and always failed miserably with hitting on the female employees, but never stopped. Story 13 old mate was a dangerous, unstable, drug-addicted nutjob. But he worked his off and constantly made the rest of the crew laugh, until the ice got the better of him and he started really going off the rails. Head snap, act like a lunatic, swing off motor chains, but I liked him. Now, I wasn't in charge of the hiring and firing. I was just the team leader of the crew. I detailed the real boss over and over again that he had to get rid of him before Head hurt someone who looked at him sideways or drove over someone on a forklift. He eventually quit the job, and I can tell you, I've never been so relieved. We genuinely liked each other, and I was one of the few people in his life who could tell him what to do, primarily because ID earned his respect, and respect was the only currency he acknowledged. The second last I heard of him, had taken a picture of himself sitting on the bonnet of his new car, holding an illegal firearm, and posted it on Facebook. The last time was when an acquaintance told me He'd been thrown in jail. Story 14, Angry. Many years ago, I ran an email helpline for an ISP. The company never actually made me a manager, but there were 9 full-time staff and 3 part-timers taking orders for me. One of them, who I never saw because he worked nights, wrote replies to customer email that bordered on abusive. My manager had me redoing his work during the day and told me not to speak to him about it. I assumed they were using the opportunity to build an HR case against him, but they never took any action. He just went on like that until years later when he resigned to take a job with a different company. Story 15, the worst employee I've known is a girl who told me she hated waking up to come to work. So in order to sleep longer in the morning, she would put her clothes on the night before and sleep in them and roll out of bed and come straight to work. She never wore pants, only thick leggings under heavy skirts. She lived with her parents and their 20 cats and would always be covered in cat hair. She didn't brush her hair and always wore a beanie. Even inside, she eventually got fired due to it, as she was a sales rep for our company. Story 16, as the manager of a communication agency, ID say toxic people workers that always believe the company is scheming something, that does whatever is possible for coworkers to distrust the company, and so on. We had one of those with us for 5 years. It was horrible. She contaminated good workers, told outright lies about things we offered her, faked her salary, so her peers would think she earned much more, among other things. In the end, we fired her, but her contamination led us to fire other 2 people who believed her and started redoing her toxic work. And no matter how many times we told them the things she told them were lies, they wouldn't believe. Story 17, I've worked with some terrible people. However, terrible people usually do terrible things against company policy and get fired. Then there are the annoying people who don't up that badly and just linger to annoy more. These are some of their stories. BB is an 18-year-old on his first job. I was his manager, but I didn't actually have a hand in hiring him. BS job involved catching fish for customers and putting them in a bag, then closing the bag with a rubber band. B could not work rubber bands. It was like the what are potatoes guy from Reddit history, but he really must never have encountered a single rubber band in his life. And no matter how many times I and others showed him how to use rubber bands, he just couldn't do it. What has come to my attention that I may have had an autism spectrum disorder, but as that person had no qualifications to diagnose anyone besides, I read it on the internet, aka a Jenny McCarthy degree, I'm not sure. Creeped customers and co-workers alike. We were all instructed to use the word assistance rather than help, because our surveys asked if we offered assistance, and our surveys turn out better if we used the words the survey used. This resulted in A approaching customers, shoulders hunched up to his ears because of something, and saying, "Can I offer you assistance?" No one wanted assistance from him. I once overheard a female associate complaining of pain. She was not talking to him, but he jumped right in and said, "Is it cramps? My mom and I are close, so I know about periods. Why God," while once pissed off an entire department by making small talk. What was this small talk? You guys should clean better, followed by a nervous chuckle, and he would stop by their department every chance he could make more small talk. It got so bad that I gave that department permission to tell it he needed to face something. We live in the South. Wrestling is pretty popular here. D adored wrestlers. It was nearly all she would talk about, and she would talk about how she didn't have a boyfriend currently because she was waiting for someone who looked like and had the body of John Cena. You know, John Cena of her potato salad fame. I once told her about the John Cena Reddit joke, and she got offended. When a customer came to check out, before even saying hello, D would say, "That'll be $1 million every single time." We had several regulars complain. We had people who worked there avoid making their own purchases if D was on a register. It quickly became known that you could not let D know where you lived. A couple people had invited her over for a party or some such, and then she took it upon herself to drop by whenever she felt like it. An intimate night in with your wife, lol, hey race D. She once dropped by a manager's house. Company has a strict fraternization policy between managers and associates to watch the wrestling, and because that guy's cousin apparently had the body of John Cena, She spent the whole time making him increasingly uncomfortable by repeatedly hitting on him. C is actually my boss. So, I'm his employee. C was hired outside the company. He had a retail manager experience. So, all he really needed to do was learn our policies and procedures and our software, etc. There were learning modules for him to do, but he also was supposed to learn from his immediate subordinate and from other store managers in the company. He did not listen to a thing. He is a salaried manager, so he does not have to clock in and out. His contract stipulates that he works 40 hours a week, whatever he's getting paid. He's getting paid with the assumption he's at the store full-time. He is not. C loves golf. If it's good golfing weather, he leaves early or just doesn't come in at all. When he is in, he stays in the office and watches golfing videos. He also micromanages whenever he can. Our scheduling program automatically schedules people, but also allows us to hand schedule. When I do it, I type in the time of the shift and press enter to go to the next day of the week for that associate. It gets me to where I need to be. C presses tab, not enter. It does the same thing. I am doing it wrong. C also gets very offended if someone asks an associate to do something when he has already asked that associate to do something. Even if the second person doesn't know about the first, C has to win because he's the guy in charge. So when he gave someone a task and another person asked that associate to perform a different task that was extremely important and had to be finished first for the safety of the animals in our store, C countermanded that and told the associate that whatever he says goes, which is understandable. But since C didn't listen about our policies, he risked injuring our pets by not knowing why the pets needed to be taken care of first. After the district manager received several complaints from multiple associates about C's behavior, she came for a visit. After the visit, C wanted to explain to me why he did what he did that got complained about. He rightly guessed I had snitched on his lazy. I let him know that playing golf when he needed to be in the store had really pissed me off. And he told me that as store manager, he wasn't going to be in the store if everything is running smoothly, which his boss said wasn't happening. He also said that as store manager, he shouldn't have to deal with customers. Ever, he should leave before we get a lot of customers during the day. This is also known as not coming to work or leaving early to play golf. C also is obsessed with group texts. Former manager had one group text for all managers. Since February, C has created at least 8 group texts for managers for various reasons. I say at least because I've been off work since May dealing with leukemia, and I know he's created at least 3 more group texts that don't involve me. In fact, I found this out by creating a group text that dropped an associate from the manager group text. She should not have been included in the first place. And then C immediately started a different group text to say that it was basically my fault for needing a new group text because I wasn't using the right group text that he started that no longer included that associate and hadn't included me because I had no idea, and then went on to say he would start an additional group text the next day, even though he apparently had 2 groups that had everyone it needed besides me, and no one had done that associate. It was so bad while I was still involved that I muted that group so I wouldn't have to hear it beep. Finally, we have C violating federal law. If you clock in or out immediately after someone else, the time clock may not recognize it because you didn't wait 5 seconds for it to go back to the right screen. I believe this happened to me one day. I had no idea I had not clocked out for a shift. My time for the week was missing 6 hours that I had worked, easy enough to fix. But C told another manager that if I expected to get paid, I had to clock in and out. Oh no, I get paid whether or not I clock in and out. I may get fired for not following policy when clocking in and out if I do it often enough to cause problems, but I get paid for whatever time I work. I know it's a pain to call someone and ask them what time they left when you're doing payroll, but it has to be done. And even if he was going to wait for me to notice it, he has absolutely no business telling someone else that if I expect to get paid, I have to clock in and out. That's not something to discuss with anyone else. Not a boss or manager. But there was a point where I worked for this electronics retail company that I was respected as one. There was this dude who worked for the company for about 6 years. He was going to school, so promotions were out of the question for him. At one point, he was the pride and joy of management because he never took the customers and was a great salesman. However, when it came to new people who did something better than him, he would get jealous. It got to the point where he would train the new guys wrong so that he could get their sales and have them viewed as terrible employees by management. It wasn't until I came along, he tried to teach me incorrectly, but I would always go around and ask other people just for in case. So it got to a point where I would pretend to listen to him and just do my job correctly. He would tell lies to the employees, even experienced ones, so that he could take their sales. He even tried to bullshit new management so that his sales would increase. I call him out on his BS during company-wide meeting. He wanted to fight me. A week later, he quits his job, pretended to say he got a better job because he graduated school, then came back a year later because he was broke as a joke. Story 18, I was on the receiving end in this case. I was working at a Thai restaurant. I didn't have a whole lot of experience, but most of the employees were from Thailand, and they needed a frontman who spoke good English. One day, not many people were coming in, so one of the managers asked me in busted up English to help cut chicken. Medium thin pieces, not much instruction, so I followed the other sous chef's example. Apparently, that was too thick. The manager came back in and lost it. She started by loudly saying they were too thick, while holding up fistfuls of raw chicken and throwing a few pieces on the floor and in the sink like a 4-year-old. I could see customers coming to the front, so I told her, well, continue this later, but she blocked the exit and continued to rant. Next, she paced around the kitchen while grumbling and pulling at her hair with her raw chicken-covered hands, ignoring the line of customers. Eventually, she sent the sous chef, who didn't speak much English, to the front and demanded I stir a big pot of soup for the rest of the day. As I was stirring the soup, she went back to chastising me in some language I couldn't understand, pacing and grumbling in a tone your parents may have used when you pissed the bed at age 3. She then looked at the chicken on the cutting board, turned to me, and said, "We can't let the boss see this." She then proceeded to pick up pieces of chicken, tossed them onto the drain in the middle of the kitchen floor, and started waffle stomping them through the grate. I angrily told her stop it and grow up, but she shot back with "back to pot" in a glass-shattering voice, and continued to stomp the chicken down the drain. After she had stomped a bunch of chicken down the drain, it clogged, so she waddled over to the sink and started mashing pieces of chicken down that drain with her greasy palm. She harassed me for the rest of the day and kept coming back up to me with pieces of chicken in her hands, then holding them inches from my face and yelling about how thick they were. As she started angrily hacking away at the rest of the chicken with a cleaver, she kept muttering if our boss was here, he would say, "You're fired," is what he would say when people out front order chicken dishes. I heard her apologizing, "Oh, I so sorry the chicken's so ugly. I cut it so bad. I not know why our boss not fire him." Eventually, our boss comes back, and hey race, what he sees the soup I'm stirring is burnt. And none of the dishes are done. I tried a few times to turn the soup off and start the dishes, but she'd come charging back and brandishing a rice paddle, screeching "back to pot. Back to pot." Also, the sous chef, who doesn't speak English, is out front having a terrible day. The manager tried to cover her, but our boss went through the security footage and saw the whole thing. He told the sous chef and I we could leave early, and we heard them yelling in some language I couldn't understand as we left. The next day, the health inspector came. Imagine his surprise when he walked into the smell of rotting chicken, while 2 employees were fishing mangled pieces of chicken out of the floor and sink drain. The inspector nearly reported the restaurant. The current manager was fired soon thereafter. TLDR manager freaks out about chicken being cut too thick, wastes food, got the health inspector called. Story 19, I work in a liquor store. One guy didn't show up for 3 days and had his mom come in and apologize. A month later, we started finding empty beer cans throughout the fridge at the end of each shift. He would also leave at random for 15 minutes without telling anyone. 4 pints at the adjoining bar, or to ask for cigarettes in the alley, or probably to drink more of our booze. Story 20, we had a guy at my movie theater who could never do anything important, like we would be shutting down concessions for the night, so everyone could go home, and I would find him in the back making kid pack boxes, which definitely weren't needed. Or would have a giant movie in theaters that needed to be turned around quickly, and he would be meticulously sweeping less than 12 a row, while there were other huge messes and customers waiting. Story 21, I was the team leader, and I was supposed to mentor this beautiful girl, which made me friends jealous. Why they didn't get. She found me on Facebook and sent me a friend request within an hour of meeting. We had things in common like Harry Potter and English Premier League, although I support Chelsea, and she Manchester United, big red flag, which I miss. She used to chat with me late evenings about common topics. Come with me for lunch and coffee, and even hanged out a bit on weekends as she was new to the city, but the biggest problem was she was so dumb that even if I spent an hour explaining, she would mess up coding another one so similar to it. It's like you explain someone 23.5, and then they can't add 32. I guess she was selected only based on looks. I had to cover up for her work too. I straight up told my manager, but he said to give her time, and she didn't improve. She constantly would complain that she can't concentrate as she was missing her family. After 3 months, I thought enough is enough and recommended her to be moved to testing, and she moved to another project, which was close to her hometown. She stopped taking to me after that. Story 22, I work as an English teacher in Japan teaching at elementary schools. It's really simple basic English, and the job really just involves playing games with the kids using English. It's also my job to train a new staff. The new guy comes over to my place, and I go through 4 weeks of lesson plans in great detail and tell him just to follow them to the letter, and he'll be fine. Once he finds his feet, he'll be able to make his own lesson plans. Next week, I get an email from my boss saying all his schools complained about his lessons, saying they were too difficult for the students, and he was arguing with the homeroom teachers. So I arranged to meet him again to follow up. I asked him what happened. He said he forgot what I had told him to do and hadn't taken enough notes. When I asked him why he didn't call me, he said, "Oh yeah, maybe I should have done that." He also seems to think that it's the fault of the Japanese education system if they think his lessons are too difficult. Skip forward 3 months, and this has been a pattern. I'm interviewing for his replacement this weekend.